The glass shattered against the tile with a sound that was too loud for the room, too loud for the hour. I stood frozen at the kitchen threshold, a spoon still warm in my hand from the soup I'd been pretending to finish, and watched the red arc of the wine spread across the white floor like a wound. She was there, Elena, kneeling, eyes rimmed with something that might have been fury or fatigue, her fingers trembling as they clutched at the broken stem. For a moment the world narrowed to that small, bright wreck and the hum of the refrigerator, and I realized the small domestic noises around us. Water in the pipes, the courier van down the block, suddenly belonged to strangers. Perfect, I said before I could stop myself. The word felt obscene, a sound thrown like a stone to see how it landed. She looked up at me, jaw working, and in that short, ridiculous interval my hope for easy fixes evaporated. I could see she had practiced this look, contained grief like a folded map. 2 nights earlier she had spoken like someone closing a chapter. "I've had enough," she said, voice low and final. "This is the last time I will bargain with you." I had smiled then, far too quick and far too hopeful, because a smile is the cheapest bandage we keep in our pockets. I thought the bargain was ours to renegotiate with promises and patience. I had been wrong. The clues had been patient and small at first, almost documents of an ordinary life. A phone face down on the nightstand with a pattern I didn't know, a cancelled dinner excused by work, lipstick on a napkin she swore she found in the pocket of a coat. I rewrote each omission into an explanation that kept me comfortable. Denial, I discovered, is an intimate architecture. It requires careful maintenance. "Tell me," I said, because saying the word felt like anchoring a drifting ship. My voice was smaller than I thought it would be. She held the towel to the wine and the motion was methodical, like someone trying to erase not just a stain but a history. "You listen for what you want to hear," she said finally. "You don't listen to me." The accusation landed with a precision that left me unarmed. I had become an expert at the translations that preserved peace. I turned her absences into travel, her tiredness into stress, and the small evasions into acts of loyalty. It had been easier than asking the kinds of questions love sometimes demands. "Who is he?" I asked. Names give shape to betrayals. Without one, the threat is amorphous and unbearable. "It's not as simple as a he," she said. The refusal to make it a single form stung. When she gave me a name, Mark, my throat closed as if I'd swallowed a stone. Mark Vernon, the artist from the summer opening, the man with paint beneath his nails and a laugh that bent light. He'd given us a postcard that night, an abstract that hung in the entryway of our apartment and now looked like a tiny altar to everything we'd misunderstood. She said it had been months. Months, those small, patient units of time, folded over and over, and in their layering the whole of us had shifted. She spoke of late afternoons in his studio where he listened in a way that felt like being seen, of dinners where conversation slipped into a language I had not learned to translate. Her words were gentle at moments, fierce at others, and always edged with a tenderness that had not been aimed at me. "Do you love him?" The question was both cowardly and essential. I wanted a neat answer, no ambiguity, no complication. "Yes," she said, and then, "I love you too." Her voice did not slice for drama so much as report something private and complex. Love, she told me later, was not a pie. It did not have neat slices. Jealousy is strange, part animal territorialism, part sudden bereavement. My chest felt like it had been hollowed. I wanted the clarity of binary truths, loved or not, faithful or not. Instead I was handed a messy truth that resembled life more closely than any pledge ever had. She had found parts of herself in another person that our routines had muffled. This insight, which should have been relief for the soul, landed on me like an accusation. We iterated small confessions like surgical cuts. She said she had not meant to hurt me. She had wanted to be honest but feared the consequences, feared destroying what we'd built. There was an honesty in that fear, but revelations amassed into culpability. Silence, I learned, is an action. So is omission. I found myself scouring for proof as if evidence could reinstate the life I thought I owned. The phone yielded messages that turned from banal to intimate, arrangements about shows, photographs with private captions, voice memos where laughter folded into whispered affection. Each message reorganized memory. Dinners became lies by omission, evenings of work became secret rehearsals of intimacy. It is a brutal talent, to rearrange memory into the pattern of betrayal. Confronting Mark at the gallery felt like stepping into an absurd parody of masculinity. He was neither ferocious nor evasive. He was oddly calm, as if intimacy with another person had made him more human, not less. "She worries about your heart," he said when I told him my name, and I hated the soft empathy in it. "She worries whether you'll let her be whole." "Do you love her?" I asked, simple and terrible. "Yes," he said. "I do." And when I asked the more obscene question, "Does she love me?" his answer held a brutal clarity. She loved what we had built together, but she was different with him. "She is different when she is with me," he said. There was no triumph in his voice, only the weariness of someone who had stepped into a fault line. Different. The idea of someone I loved changing shape in the presence of another man felt like a theft of identity. Back home, our conversations turned into logistics: who would keep the cat, which bank accounts to untangle, how to reassign the small things that make up an ordinary life. The practicalities were obscene in their mundanity. They forced us to perform competence over the raw interior of our grief. The little acts, dividing shirts, relocating mugs, took on the gravity of rites. We tried, awkwardly, to be honest. Honesty was not an antiseptic cure. It was a blunt and necessary tool that cut as it cleared. We enumerated small failures. I admitted to smoothing things over to preserve peace. She admitted to seeking a reflection of herself in another person. The confessions did not heal so much as create a new landscape where we could attempt, haltingly, to live. Anger and grief braided together. Sometimes I wanted to rage, break the postcard, tear down the print Mark had given us, turn our apartment into a bulletin of accusation. Sometimes I wanted to curl and be small and pretend this was a nightmare with an ending. Mostly, I wanted to know where I had been in her interior life while the halves of us rearranged around new centers. I began to relearn how to care for myself. Small lists: sleep, walk, cook, call a friend, became the scaffolding that held me upright. Routine does not erase sorrow, but it gives the body a script to follow when the heart has to find its language again. The days gave way to a rhythm of practicalities and the quieter work of reassembling a self that did not rely wholly on being someone's other half. In the months that followed, there were moments that refused simplification. Tenderness that surprised me, the sight of her laughter with someone else stabbing me like a blade, the odd gratitude when something honest landed between us without immediate violence. Betrayal, I learned, is not only the act of the other person. It is a mirror that shows you where you consented to being left. The bedroom felt like a place that belonged to strangers. I sat on the edge of the bed and picked up the face-down phone I had ignored for months, as if ignoring could substitute for inspection. Unlocking it felt like opening an archaeological box. The messages at first were ordinary, plans for exhibitions, jokes about palettes, but they accumulated into a private geography. Late breakfasts in the studio, a nickname traded for someone who wasn't me, a photo captioned in a way that made my stomach drop. A voice memo made my blood run cold, her laughter braided with another man's breath, and there was an intimacy in the sound that had been absent from our domestic evenings. There is a violence to discovery, a slow dissection of the past until everything aligns differently. The wallpaper, the postcard from the opening, the blue scarf I had bought her in Paris. Their meanings changed as if someone had painted over the familiar with a new, sharper color. Everything rearranged itself into evidence. I went to the gallery because men do histories in public spaces sometimes, staging their affront like a ritual. Mark was there, sleeves rolled and attentive to a canvas. He greeted me without pomp. "She worries about your heart," he said again, a line that had become an accusation from outside. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a man who had become someone else's companion. "She's softer with me," he admitted in a way that made me ache. The conversation was blunt and adult. Neither of us had the right to more than truth. That night, walking the city felt like trailing the outline of a body I had once known intimately. I went home and watched Elena move in the rooms we both had learned the edges of. There were times when she would cry and press her forehead against mine and say she was sorry, and there were times she would be distant, lost in a space that had once been shared and now belonged to two. She told me again and again that she hadn't meant to be cruel. She had been trying to be brave in private. Bravery, cleaved from kindness, does not always look like virtue. We separated gently, Not a cinematic exit but a series of small negotiations. The cat's food dish became a political parcel. Bills were divided like monuments cut into pieces. At night, the bed felt like a stage set where two actors tried to remember lines from a play neither wrote. In the daylight, we built new routines around absence. I learned what it meant to be domestic for one. Washing a single mug, making a single sandwich, tucking a single shirt away. Those tiny acts were grief rehearsals. They taught me the muscles of living with a smaller life. Sometimes I wanted revenge, an email to an art buyer, a confrontation staged at a show, but revenge evaporated like breath. It provided no oxygen for the hollow ache. Anger became a fossilized thing to examine and discard. Instead, the surprising project of my life became learning how to be sincere with myself again. I wrote lists of things that mattered to me outside the frame of us. Run 3 times a week, call my sister, start a class. These were small, stubborn acts of repair. Elena and I tried to practice a new honesty. We sat across from each other and named where we had failed and where we had been brave. She told me about colors that made her cry in the gallery, about a kindness Mark offered that had moved her. I spoke about the nights I had smoothed arguments rather than excavating them. Confession did not absolve us, it clarified. Sometimes clarity is cruelty because once you see, you cannot unsee. There were days that felt like mercy, a sudden laugh from both of us at some shared memory, a leftover slice of cake eaten with the odd solace of being two people who had once loved each other in a particular way. There were other days when the memory of her voice in another room made me flinch at the sound of the kettle. These small oscillations became the weather of our lives. One afternoon she handed me the postcard Mark had given us the night we met. She watched me open it like someone watching whether a wound would bleed again. "I need you to have it," she said. "It belongs to our story." I touched the print and realized the anger had a strange companion. Gratitude for the honesty that finally arrived. The print's colors were messy and brilliant, as if the artist had painted in a hurry to get to the truth. I put it away rather than fling it out, because erasing evidence felt like erasing lessons. We did not return to the way we'd been. That possibility had been excised by months of parallel lives and private tenderness. What remained was a new arrangement, some days apart, sometimes together, a slow experiment of whether we could keep what was valuable without pretending it was whole. Forgiveness was not a gift in those months. It was a transaction, an effort of repeated choosing. Time, not magic, eased the rawness. There were people I could talk to who did not judge me for being both victim and someone who had not been perfect. I took small, steady steps. Therapy, a running route I kept like a promise, a spontaneous trip to a lake that had been on my list of things to do someday. The lists mattered. Each crossed item was a tiny reclaiming of self. Months in, Elena left for an art residency. She folded the blue scarf I had bought into a small square and left it on the chair for me. The house felt both emptier and, in an odd way, fuller. Absence had taught me what presence had been. She sent messages of updates, photos of canvases and clouds, and sometimes those messages arrived with an almost boyish joy in a life pursuing a shape that had been waiting for them to discover it. I read them with a stomach that no longer flipped into panic but sat with a complex ache that had become my new companion. One night we sat on the couch, the apartment dim and quiet, the cat stretched like a small, surrendered thing between us. "Do you regret it?" I asked, because I needed to inventory the ruin and the salvage. She looked at me and the face that returned was unexpectedly plain, neither polished nor performative. "Yes and no," she said. "I regret the pain I caused. I don't regret that I found parts of myself." Her voice was raw and honest in a way that made me ache and be grateful at once. We learned to listen in a new language. We practiced naming feelings without using them as weapons. We rebuilt small rituals, Sunday coffee at 10, a call on Wednesdays to check in, telling each other when we felt lonely. The contours of trust could not be the same, but trust could be reformed as a different practice. Slower, more deliberate, less assumed. Betrayal had taken from us, certainly. It had also shown us where our edges were thin. It taught me about the danger of complacency, about how a life can become an easy story until someone else draws a different outline. It taught us both that people are not always singular, that identity can be plural without being inherently treacherous, And that truth, however late, is a currency worth stronger bargaining. In the end, there was no dramatic ending. No door slammed in a hall of witnesses, only small acts of continuation. I wrapped the blue scarf around my shoulders on a cold morning and realized the fabric had folded into my life like memory. Both warm and, sometimes, a little abrasive. I wrote a short list and pinned it to the fridge. Keep breathing, keep asking, keep listening. The list was a small liturgy, a practiced honesty. It was not enough to erase what had happened, but it was the first thing I could offer to the person I was becoming. Someone who would ask hard questions sooner and be brave enough to hear the answers.